was a strange start for the whole crew. We were lucky that we knew each other for a long time, and we were not only like colleagues, we were also close friends. So it was very natural for us to make something which then we found out military psychologists, they call it debriefing. So it's after every combat mission, especially if something went wrong, you are in the next like 24, 72 hours maximum, you are having a discussion with everybody who participated.
I'm talking to you in the name of the Association of the Swiss Film Journalists. I'm a member of this group, and we like to invite you to this panel to the issue of mental health in documentary filmmaking. Who is a documentary filmmaker? So we have a couple of them here, and the other ones are probably just interested, why are we talking about mental health in documentary filmmaking? I have to admit, in the beginning, my name is Monika Scherer. I did not really know when Denise Bucher, who is the president of the Association of Swiss Filmmakers, called me up and said, let's talk about this. I thought, okay, I mean, I can imagine that a lot of people who are filming in difficult and war zones or difficult environments or with traumatized people, that this could be a very tough job. But then I did some research and I learned more about the issue, and I learned more that it's really an issue we have to talk about because it's actually affecting more or less all the documentary filmmakers in different ways, not only if they go to a war zone. And I learned also that there's a lot of research being done, I mean scientifically being done on the issue, and that also there's, especially in the English-speaking world, there's also an awareness to the issue, even more so than in our speaking world. There's been articles in the IndieWire, for example, about it. The whole issue was focused on that mental health in documentary filmmakers, and there's been a lot of talks about it and panels at the Sundance Film Festival, for example. So we are here to discuss this issue, and I'm so happy to have Yuri, now I have to, Reginski with us. Yuri is from Vienna, but he's actually a Ukrainian, and he made a film in the Ukraine, which we can see on Monday in the Semaine de la Critique. He's showing his world premiere. It's going to be there, and we're really happy that you made it to Locarno, because that was quite difficult to get here. Maybe you can give us quickly an insight on your difficulties to come here.
I would rather not.
You would rather not. Okay, but maybe Yuri, you can tell me why is this topic affecting you, mental health in documentary film making, or how?
Well, this is something I'm forced to deal with in the last 2.5 years since I started with the beginning of full-scale invasion. I started to document parts of it, and yeah, I finished working on it only like 5 months ago, and it was a very intense experience. For me, it was for the first time an experience of working in a war zone, but not the first experience of, you know, having challenging, traumatic shooting or editing. So I had already some, you know, method or technology how to get out of these states of, you know, being traumatized, and I was already ready that it will take some time. So it's not a fast process. In my case, like, I needed a year to start sleeping and normally eating again.
Maybe you can give us some more insight on how you deal with it and how you work with these situations. I would like to introduce the other panelists. Sue Moires. We know Sue as a documentary filmmaker from Switzerland. Raving Iran was one of your films. Saudi Runaway premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. And Girl Gang, which is about social media and influences. Maybe, Sue, you can tell us briefly why this issue is concerning you as a filmmaker.
Hello. Great that there's so many people, despite the heat. I didn't shoot in a war zone. I mean, Raving Iran, I shot in Iran, which is a repressive system, but not a war zone. And Saudi Arabia just as well. And Girl Gang, I actually shot in Germany. And I have to say that with every film had some kind of physical and psychological repercussions on me. And I guess everyone who's making documentary films will probably agree. I think it's very complex, the field. I think it's not just being in a war zone where obviously, which is dangerous, but I think it is also, it can be the relationship to your protagonists, it's the pressure you put on yourself, because you actually do want to achieve you want to achieve something, then it really depends on what kind of film you make. For example, I make single character-driven films, which means if my character drops out after like 3 years of filming, I'm left with nothing. So I think that is kind of the range I'm dealing with.
Alan Motley, you're the third on our sofa here. You're a film critic. You're also a member of the Association of the Swiss Film Critics. You have your own blog. You work also at the English seminar at the university. How is a film critic sort of affected by mental health in documentary filmmaking? By just watching too many films, or?
On the one hand, definitely yes, but then also on the other hand, I mean, I know I come at this topic from a very privileged position, but I think as a critic, I conceive of criticism as a conversation, both with my own thoughts, with my own writing, but also with the films I'm writing about or I'm thinking about. And in the case of documentaries, there is often this fine line between what is my appreciation, what is my approach to the film from an artistic standpoint and also from a personal standpoint. And I think in the case of documentaries where filmmakers' mental health is in the foreground, it's often difficult to distinguish between what is my reaction to the film, as a piece of cinematic craftsmanship, and what is my reaction as a human being, because quite often these films will also have an impact on my mental health or on my personal biases in a certain way, and it's also about making sense of myself as a critic and myself as a, for lack of a better word, consumer of the films I watch.
Thank you so much for this quick introduction of all of you. One person was introduced to the panel, but it couldn't make it. This is Talal Derki, a Syrian based in Berlin, who made a film which was nominated for an Oscar of Fathers and Sons, but unfortunately he couldn't come and share his experience with us. Let us put a focus now on this issue. I mean, you said you're aware of this, but how do you when you choose a subject for your film, how much do you take that in account, what pressure it's going to put on yourself?
Well,
maybe you can tell us a little bit about your film also.
Yes, I can try. Well, I think if you're not, let's say, affected by the experience of getting into the subject, getting into the topic, then it's not the right subject for you. So I'm searching to be you can call it traumatized, but there are more correct words, maybe like changed, altered. I want to figure out something I didn't know before shooting or going into research. And of course, the more intensely you are shaking, the better is it an experience in a way. Like you found something which is dramatically altering you, which is a good thing in my book. About the film, so when the full-scale invasion started, I was in Vienna because this is where I live for the last 10 years. I have a family there, and I spent the first 2-3 months on the east side of the border of Ukraine. But then we got the financing for the project, and I decided to go in because I wanted to have a direct experience of what is happening in the country where I was growing. And following this situation from the media and discussions with my friends who are still in Ukraine, it was not giving me this experience. So when I came to Ukraine, I figured out that it looks very differently than this image which you're getting from the news. And then it was the beginning of a long journey of getting closer and closer to the front line with smaller steps than you would actually usually do in filmmaking, just because everything is very new and because there is a real danger to your health or your life or your crewmates. And regarding the topic, we very quickly discovered, like my main impression from what is war was that the war is a thing which moves people and things on a big scale. So there are many different flows of people from the front line, and there are many different flows of people and equipment and ammunition to the front line. It's quite a long logistical chains with many different organizations and people involved, and we were just choosing one of the flows, which was evacuation of people from Donetsk region who cannot leave themselves. So people of age, lonely people, people with disabilities and diseases. And then we were just researching, okay, this is one stage, like they're being picked up from their homes and driven to the train station. Like, what is happening next? What is the chain? And after we got quite a good impression, like where the story goes, and got all the permissions, we started to film again from the very starting point, from the point when people are taken from their homes. And on the first shooting day, one of our characters whom we were following, she died like on a distance of 20 centimeters from the camera.
You can still see it in the film, is that
yes.
the scene?
Yes, and it was a strange start for the whole crew. We were lucky that we knew each other for a long time, and we were not only like colleagues, we were also close friends. So it was very natural for us to make something which then we found out military psychologists, they call it debriefing. So it's after every combat mission, especially if something went wrong, you are in the next like 24, 72 hours maximum, you are having a discussion with everybody who participated, and just let everyone talk through what was happening from their perspective, what went wrong, what is their emotional state. So in our case, that was a very lucky, natural, intuitive decision to do such sessions, and I think this helped us, to survive as a functioning crew.
But you said when you said you were afraid of losing your life or being affected mentally from this filmmaking, from this shooting. What was heavier on your decision to continue to make this film? I mean,
well, mental consequences I was not taking into account at all. Like with mental consequences, it was clear that there will be some. It was not clear to which degree, but it was also clear that this is something for the point when you are done with the shooting. Like you cannot be affected by it now. The motivation still to go there was I wanted to take part in what is going on and to contribute, even if this contribution is absolutely miserable and tiny, but still I couldn't live my normal life in Vienna. Yeah, I couldn't ignore what is happening, and I wanted to take part. The question was to take part with a gun or to take part with a camera, and I decided to try it with the camera because this is a tool I'm experienced with, and maybe I will be more useful with this tool and this experience than with a gun.
So when I listen to Yuri, it makes for me absolutely sense that someone living in Vienna, having a Ukrainian background, want to go back and portray or have a deeper look into a situation. With your films, I think you can just choose to expose yourself. I mean, there's not the same, let's say, biography need to go into this element of being exposed to difficult situations. You said, as a filmmaker itself, you're always exposed. So how would you describe it? Why do you expose yourself to these difficult situations you're going through?
Hard to say. I think, of course, when you make your first film, you don't know. You just don't know. And I've now made 3 feature-length docs, and I've come to a point where no, I can't continue making films like I used to make them, because I really felt the repercussions were too large, too big. But
what were they exactly? How would you describe them?
I mean, it's very, yeah. I had physical things, like really weird. I had, like, during my last film, I had neurodermitis, if you know. It's like a skin rash, which went away with my premiere. And with the other films, I had the same thing. And then, you know, with all films, of course, you know, long patches of anxiety, sleeplessness, insomnia, yeah, like feeling unwell for, like, basically the whole time of actually producing, and even beyond bringing the film into the world. But I really, you know, when Yuri said, okay, your focus is on the film and you actually don't think about it, I couldn't agree more, because when you're actually in the process of making it, you know, this thing you're making is so much bigger than yourself that you actually do not feel anything like personally what's going on. You only feel it afterwards. Of course you feel, you know, feelings of anxiety, and you do realize you have sleepless nights, but it doesn't affect you that much because, you know, you actually want to make this film. And I feel you almost become like an empathy sponge, you know, because you are the filter between the world, you know, between the world and what is actually going to be on the screen later on. And I think that does a lot to you. So basically this film is kind of flowing through you, and you kind of, you know, translating it into a film, where you know, the world is flowing through you and you're translating it into a film. And I think when it comes to, I mean, you probably agree, it's when it comes to protagonists, I think you're so much overstepping your own boundaries while shooting, because whoever's shooting films here knows that, you know, you want to get this story, and let's say you're in a room with your protagonist, you know, a fight's breaking out, and everything you would usually do as a human being is kind of step back and leave the room. But actually, as a documentary filmmaker, you have to step closer. And so this constantly overstepping your own mark does something with you. because it's not just you, you're actually overstepping the mark, the boundaries of your protagonist as well. So that also weighs really heavy on you. So you're constantly in this very problematic energy field. And that kind of continues all the way to, you know, to the premiere, because you're still in this problematic energy field whilst you're editing the film, because you are, you know, because you're not just, you know, sitting there and producing something you think is going to look nice and it's going to work for, you know, the audience. You're actually also trying to portray the people. So you have this responsibility of, you know, depicting someone's life. And that's really weighs heavy. And I know, I mean, especially with my last film, I was in the editing for a year, and I always show my protagonists my films before, you know, before the release. And I didn't, throughout this year of editing, I had sleepless nights because I knew I have to show it to them. And not because I was, you know, creating something bad, but just because this responsibility of, hey, am I doing the right job here? Is this really, you know, you're really trotting on this like no man's land for a very long time. And all of that, I mean, this is the complexity of it. So it's very hard to name. And, you know, I think often, I felt, for example, with Raving Iran, I feel when you can control the situation in the sense of you can prepare yourself. So I knew when I was going into Iran, I knew I had to take certain measures of, you know, safety to actually get my equipment in there, to make sure that my protagonists are safe. So these things kind of felt, you know, I felt I had a, let's say, like a minimum to medium control over things. But when it comes to, I don't know, when it comes to relationships with protagonists, it's really, you know, that is beyond your control. And what I said before is, especially when you're shooting films which are based on a single character and you're shooting over years and years and years, that does something. Yeah.
Before I come to you, Alan, I would like to ask you about this empathy sponge Sue was mentioning. Is that also the way you see yourself as a filmmaker? You're an empathy sponge, sucking up more or less all these emotions, all these tensions?
Yes, if I got it correctly, and I think I got, but it's a good term. I see one of my roles on a set of a documentary film to feel things and then to share them. So blocking emotions is not working. Like blocking empathy makes you useless. Like you need to perceive emotionally what is happening, and you need to connect to it. And for that, you are paying the price in the end. But this is your function. If I would be, I don't know, if I would be a cinematographer, then maybe I would more think about myself as a eye or retina. Yeah. But as the director, I think you are the heart.
Alan, when you watch films like Sumer's or Yuri Lejinsky's films, how much do you take in account what's happening with the filmmakers, or how important is it for you as a critic to feel it, to sense it, to know it?
It always depends on the film, I think. Also because, as Sue was saying, these films are ultimately bigger than the filmmakers themselves. Not in all cases, obviously, but in a lot of cases, they stand on their own, and they're not the singular expression of one person's viewpoint, but they are a collective effort on the one hand, and on the other hand, they present an image, an impressionistic image that the filmmaker, through collaborative effort, presents. But then, of course, on the other hand, there are cases where documentary films, especially ones where mental health is in the foreground, where the personal involvement of the filmmaker is unmissable. And then, depending on the kind of criticism you do, then it can quickly become quite reductive if for example you're watching a documentary by someone chronicling their own childhood trauma of having been abused, for example, and then you are the critic and you watch the film, and at the end of the day it's like, okay, 2 stars. So that's extremely reductive, of course, but even in cases where let's say the what is being portrayed on screen and my own reaction to it, where those two things don't really gel, I think even there it's important to also to feel this this empathy sponge, let's say, and to remain empathetic and to react in a way that is appropriate and that does take into account what has been going on behind the camera, and to be, if nothing else, cognizant of the fact that in most cases I'm not watching a multi-million-dollar studio effort from Hollywood, but that I'm watching a documentary that has a social conscience and that has a filmmaker behind the camera who, as they said, is dealing in empathy at the end of the day. But it is definitely a challenge that, from the critic side, that has to be taken into account time and time again. And which is, again, I come back to what I said previously, that as critics in this conversation, we are in an incredibly privileged position, because we, at the end of the day, only get to see the finished product. Often the finished product will carry the traces of the struggle or the dangers that have gone into making the film, but still we are watching it in the safety of the cinema or of our own living rooms. So being cognizant of this divide is definitely essential, I think.
Sue, you said it's also, your film's about single characters you follow for a long time. You build a relationship. You said you're an empathy sponge, so you're very close to them. You know their feelings, but it's also keeping the distance. Is that also something that causes, let's say, pressure on you, and how does that show? Are you falling into a role of a therapist in a way? Maybe because it's, the person you follow are dealing with a difficult situation in their lives.
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, maybe subconsciously, or for them, maybe there is. I mean, let's say, shooting Raving Iran or Saudi, my film Saudi Runaway. Because I was there, maybe it did feel for them there was like a constant in life, or there was maybe someone who could, even if she wasn't helping, she was kind of there. But from my point of view as a director, I do not feel as a therapist, and I do really try to keep my distance, in the sense that I'm not offering, because I also, the way I'm making my films, I don't want anyone to address the camera while I'm there. So for me, it's all about becoming, kind of melting into the background and actually not be seen. So I'm always on this fine line of, I'm there, but I'm also trying not to be there. But I think it's more, saying empathy sponge, I think it's more about, because all of your antennas are out, like over, in my case now, over years, every single bit you're trying to sense, that is just incredibly tiring and very often not very nice, just very banal things. It's, for example, you're at home and you're texting your protagonist just asking, hey, how are you doing? Or, hey, are we going to see each other soon? And then this person isn't texting back for like a day, then 2, then 3, maybe a week. And that is hell. I mean, that sounds very banal. It's just, if a friend isn't responding, it's like, okay, maybe she's busy. But with a protagonist, it's a different thing. Yeah.
You said you have your family in Vienna, and you're in a difficult situation, or in a dangerous spot, and you have a son in Vienna. How do you tell him? What do you tell him, or how do you deal with that situation, like these two worlds?
Well, I had a very strong feeling that I will be of no use to him if I will not go. And I had the whole shooting was something, shooting and research. In Ukraine, I was for half a year, and there was one point where I could come back to see him and to rest between the stories. And yeah, he was asking me, like, why are you going to a place where bombs are falling and you can die? Well, because I have to. I have a strong feeling that I have to do it. I don't know if I would do it now, after this experience and after, answering partly to my initial question, what is war and how it looks like.
So you say you're not sure if you would do it now? That means what you experienced changed your life in a way that made you think about exposing yourself to a situation like this would cause in a different answer. I mean, you wouldn't go. Or did I understand you correctly?
Well, it's easy. It's way easier to go for soldiers on a first fight than on a second, because before going to the first fight, they have no idea what will be there, what will they experience, and to go to the second one, this is really a breaking point for many of them. And yeah, I know like the range of possible outcomes and emotional states and physical outcomes of going there again. So yeah, I would ask myself 2-3 times before making a decision to go again to Ukraine.
Sue, I mean, maybe it's a stupid question, but why do you expose yourself to these situations and to these physical, you said you had even physical issues during the shooting, getting sick. Why do you do that?
Well, I did ask that myself, obviously. Like I said, I think with the first film, you don't actually know what you're getting yourself into. And once I made my second and my third, I think the answer I found for myself that it is really about intensity, and that making these kind of films, I mean, I can't think of any other profession that gets you that close to life and to really understand life. And that this kind of intensity that this work process gives you, it doesn't actually matter if it's positive or negative. In the end, it's just intense. And that, I guess, will probably a lot of people agree, can be addictive. But it did actually go that far that I started working on a film last year, and it was also, I think, Gaza broke out in October, and all of a sudden I felt like, no, I can't do this anymore. And I actually dropped the project because I knew I could not go through this at this moment of time. And this is not the right film I can make at this point of time. So I actually put this film on the shelf, and I'm working on something completely different now, which has got nothing to do with the protagonist I have to, be with for, numerous years. And it's actually something I can kind of create myself, like really create, without being fiction.
We were talking about the filming itself, the shooting, the moments on the scene, but there's also a lot of time you spent in the editing room and decision also what to show, what not to show, watching it all over again situations. Maybe Yuri, you can tell us a little bit about that process in the sense of what your experience as also traumatic maybe, or difficult to take. You sort of expose your audience afterwards with it in the same way. So how do you sort of work in the editing room with these thoughts in your mind?
Yeah, well, for me, it's two very different stages, and each with own challenges. First stage is research and shooting, and second is editing. And editing actually is in a way, it's more challenging, or it was more challenging in this case. Second half of the film, second story, second flow, which we were following for 3 months, it was about evacuation of skilled soldiers. And like in order to do the research, I realized that it's not possible to just observe this thing. Yeah, like, I cannot come there with a notepad and stand aside and write my impressions. This is not how it's working. I will just faint or start to vomit. So what I was doing, I was like participating. I was helping physically on every stage of evacuation of corpses, starting from the searching teams and then different kinds of like deliveries, transportation. And of course, while doing it, you see a lot of stuff which is better. Like you would be a happier person if you would not see them. And but still, while shooting, while research, there is a lot of concrete short-term tasks, physical ones usually, and there is a lot of adrenaline sometimes because of the danger or because of the challenge of shooting. Plus, you have responsibility for the crew. For me, it was way easier to hold myself up during shooting than when I came to Vienna to edit it. Because when I came to Vienna to edit it, on the third day, my body was realizing, okay, there is no direct life danger. I can relax a little bit and now recover everything what I was losing. And at this very point, the psycho just gets nuts. Yeah, and it's quite rapid process. Yeah, like yesterday, everything was relatively fine. You were like, okay, maybe you were reacting strangely on a loud sound. Today, you cannot enter the bus or the train because you start to like suffocate, and yeah, you have very strong like images of now the rocket is coming into this train, and like, yeah, you need to collect all the pieces of the passengers, like stuff like that. And then sleep. Well, the sleep was an issue also during shooting, like after every adrenaline situation or after everything traumatizing, it just stops. Like you doesn't matter when you go to sleep, doesn't matter like how intoxicated you are, you just cannot. And there, during editing, it was becoming something chronic. Yeah, if I could have like 3 hours of sleep, it was not so bad. But how to get out of it? Like, I'm usually waiting for some. Like, I was receiving a lot of proposals for some professional treatment, for antidepressants, for sleeping pills. I was intentionally refusing all of them because I knew that the state through which I'm coming from, it will be massive and relevant thing for all the soldiers who are coming back from the war zone, for example, or prisoners, or like it is an experience which will and is already experienced by a huge amount of people. And actually, this is part of the journey to figure it out from inside, to just go through it. So what helped me was to ask myself, like, what do I like? What do I love? Yeah. And for me, the main thing was my son. So I focused on just having time with him, and it's not working like immediately. You can be in a state where communication or interaction with a normal person is not really working, or it's extremely difficult. But what was helping me as an approach was to not think about the past, not think about the future. Like in the end of the day, just analyze like what was going wrong today, and make a very simple plan for tomorrow, like how to make these interactions better. Because the past usually can be full of negative emotions or memories or shocking things, and the future, in my case, was the source of huge unidentified anxiety or pain. But focusing on, just 2 days, that was a very helpful for me. And yeah, this is how I overcome this condition. Plus, at some point, like physical activity helps incredibly much. Like intense, high intensity training, if you do it regularly, like just helps to be more stable, like to not be thrown so easily again in a dysfunctional state.
Sue, if I bring you to the editing room, but also with the question how you sort of protect your protagonists at that moment and yourself and the audience. I mean, you are showing us something which has to be exciting, interesting, challenging, whatever, maybe suspense. How do you deal with that, and how is your approach to this?
Oh yeah, that's. I guess that's a different topic now.
Well, but
yeah.
with the focus of what do I see? I mean, you put me as an audience or Alan as a critic into a feeling afterwards.
Yeah, I think this is what I was trying to say earlier on. It's a long process. I mean, like every film I edited was a year and almost a year. It's difficult to say, I have to say. Yeah, it's really, you slowly get there and you try to stick to life and you try to stick to your memories. But then life is really reduced to just what you have on film and on audio. I mean, that becomes the life. And you still try to resemble what you've experienced before with that, what you've got. And then you start to do test screenings to see how people actually respond to this. And then later on you do, take your protagonists into the room and see how they feel themselves being on screen and how, if they feel depicted in the right way.
Ellen, maybe from you as a critic side, I mean, there's like a lot of, let's say, Netflix series or whatever, where the emotions and the thrive has to be very high, and how do you have the feeling how much is good for an audience and how much is too much for you as an audience? I mean, not for the audience, but for you as an audience. How do you deal with those emotions that are being sort of maybe over the top, even showing you too much?
In a documentary, you mean? I mean, it always depends on the framing. There are, of course, documentaries, I think, where the narrative angle or the emotional angle might be overstated, but that is that doesn't necessarily have to be because the material doesn't warrant it, but it can be a problem in the editing. It can be something as simple as the addition of an overbearing music score or a voiceover that seems out of place. But I mean, obviously, I don't have that not direct insight into into what goes into constructing such a narrative on the one hand, and then also, there's a question of funding on the other hand. Like, a film does have to be marketed at the end of the day, even if it is a documentary film. So
is that pushing the limits?
In what
sometimes?
Way?
I don't know. I mean, being more extreme, showing more, putting more tension into a film. Sue, maybe I'm looking at you.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Not for me. I think that's different for everyone in what kind of context or mind frame you're actually making the film. I mean, for me, it's important that the film can be felt. And the film is a residue of life. So I have to kind of fill this little drop that is left with me as much that it is as big as what I experienced. So I mean, I really I can't analyze my own films, but I don't think they're overdone. So no, but what I feel, the pressure I have myself is that I feel, you know, I've been given money, and this is, you know, luckily, like in our, you know, in our Europe, it's public funding, and I feel a huge responsibility to actually work wisely with this cash that's been given to me.
I think, coming back to your question before, I think it's relatively, to me at least, relatively obvious if, let's say, the emotional arc or the suspense or the tension in a documentary film is artificially inflated. I think that's something that comes across relatively easily. So I don't think the question here is there too much of an arc? Is there too much tension? But is it framed in an quote unquote authentic way? I don't want to be the authenticity police, because obviously most filmmakers will say that their films show something authentic. But I think the mere fact of there being these kinds of tensions or these kinds of arcs is not necessarily a bad or a manipulative thing, but they can definitely be artificially inflated.
And it's a question of taste and style, and it really depends on where your money is coming from. Let's look at the US, where most of the money is actually, you know, private. It's equity, and there is a much stronger pressure to actually make, you know, something commercially successful, which we don't have in that sense. I mean, we want to make good films, we want that our films are being seen, but we don't have this pressure of this needs to be a box office hit.
Maybe for the last round, before we have maybe some questions or remarks or experiences from the audience, you already started saying, Yuri, that this experience might have made you think about your next project, how you would or would not go for it. But there's also the question, how much support would you need from, let's say, within the budget? I mean, that you can sort of have a coach to go with you on the project. Is that something you would ask for, or is that something you would want to decide yourself if you need it? Or because there's thought about, you know, having it in the budget, even like other positions in a budget they have to be to get money.
Are you talking about like budgeting psychological treatment or something like that, support?
Yeah. For you as a filmmaker, in the consequence that it's mental health in documentary filmmaking should be stay healthy.
I think I would appreciate way more like financial security for the next few years. Like that would make my life way easier. Because it's like that. I'm working on a film for 3 years. In the end of these 3 years, I realize, okay, in like 2 months, I'm running out of money. That would be...
So that would take pressure from you.
That would take incredible amount of pressure. Mm-hmm. Like my psychological state would be way healthier if I know that I don't have to care about this financial question for the next year at least.
Sue, besides the financial security, what would it be that you could, that helps you in sort of in your work?
Yeah, we talked about this before. I wouldn't know. To have a psychologist budgeted, yes, that would be great, but I wouldn't know if he or she would be the right person to talk to, because this person has never gone through what I'm going through. And also, I guess that's very personal, but I feel this kind of hardship just comes with filmmaking. And it's only then when you go, just what Yuri said, I mean, you kind of have to go through it. Otherwise, you're not going to have a film. It's part of the of the process. Of course, I could consult someone afterwards, but yeah, not sure.
It's the price you pay, sort of, for your
Yeah,
self-chosen work.
That might sound a bit hard, yes, but I guess yes.
Yeah. Let me have a look in the audience. Is there a question to Yuri, to Sue, to Alain, or yes? Do we have a microphone? Yes, it's here. It's coming.
As a filmmaker myself, I feel like also when listening to you that we somehow still lack professional ways of dealing with mental health, because in every other high risk or highly emotional jobs, like as doctors or whatever, you always have a supervision, and it's like part of the structure of working, being able to work every day and get up every day and do this hard work every day and lose people also on the way, but still like to be able to continue this and have a good distance to the work, but also still be empathetic and engaged. And my question in that sense is, because I didn't hear you mention it, maybe I also didn't caught it, but if it would help to search more support in like a community of fellow filmmakers, or just even, for example, with you, people that have similar experiences of trying to portray a war situation and have been in it, because there are so many people that have similar experiences, and if we share our emotions or thoughts with each other, I think community is most of the time, or collective sharing is most of the time what helps in many situations.
Yeah, very much. I agree. Sharing is definitely helping, and I talk a lot to my fellow filmmakers about, what I'm going through and what they're going through, realizing that everyone's going through the same, which really takes a lot of weight off my shoulders. And there's also now quite a lot of online communities. You can, like, especially D-Word, if you know. It's an American website. Check them out, they're really good. So D-Word, documentary word. And they have a huge fellowship and a huge thread on mental health.
Maybe, Yuri, is there an exchange between Ukrainian filmmakers who experience at the moment more or less the same situations or similar situations? Do you share these experiences?
Well, there is, of course, sharing, and sharing is incredibly helpful. It happens between friends, usually. And so happen that many of these friends, they are in the same situation, going through the same experience as fixers for, I don't know, new Western media, or documentary makers themselves, or soldiers, or civilians from places like Bucha, yeah, and they're all your friends. We had meetings during shooting on a funeral of our friend. There were, I think, majority of Ukrainian fixers and documentary filmmakers were there, and we, of course, were drinking all night and talking about, and when did you get melted, and how did you came out of this state? But it's not something. It's not supervision. It's not regular thing. Regularly during shooting, it's discussions with the crew. A lot of them, like as often as you have energy to, because it's extremely helpful to keep everybody together. During editing, well, I had an editor. She also got PTSD from this material. She started to drink and to smoke in the process. Who else? Yeah, a few people with similar experience. But at some point, you also want to stop talking about it. Like you just want to switch onto something new or something else. Because it's easy to get stuck. You know, it's easy to get stuck in the past, and it's quite like, in my opinion, it's not very helpful.
But thank you so much for talking about it here in Locarno, about this issue of mental health in documentary filmmaking. As we learned, it's an important issue, and we can learn from each other and talk to each other. And I say thank you so much for sharing. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.